Hey guys, this is Tommy here, and welcome to Pokey Accounting YouTube channel. And uh, today I want to talk about something interesting, and that's just really the economics, basic microeconomics of how economics works and how it applies to the Pokemon market. And really, I hope you learned something from this video. I'm just going to talk about some of the basic fundamentals of supply, demand, shifts in supply and demand, as well as the market equilibrium and what happens when we have shortages and what happens when we have surpluses, because these are really important things. And if you really look at the cycle of Pokemon, you will notice that all these things have occurred in the past, and this is nothing new. It's nothing um, like of a phenomenon. This is just how economic principles have occurred since the existence of human history, and the way we've traded and the way we've bartered and the way we've just lived life. And so, um, yeah, I hope you learn a thing or two today. And let me shrink this down. Okay, so starting off, let's talk about supply. What is supply? So the supply is the number of units that are available at a given time in the market. And if we look at something like a newer set in Pokemon, the supply is unknown, right? And it's the interesting with Pokemon though is that it's ever shifting and ever changing. Product gets ripped, product gets lost, product gets destroyed, but product also gets printed. And how much of it gets printed, we don't really know. And there's not like a clear number out there of how many boxes of Evolving Skies exist, how many boxes of Destined Rivals exist, right? We don't know for sure. We can kind of draw some conclusions, like how many boxes of Evolving Skies exist. We can look at like TCG Player, and we can see that the number of Evolving Skies that was sold in 2025 was 296 boxes, and then there are currently 152 listed. So that's like 448, right? But this doesn't consider the amount of sales on eBay, the sales that occurred on like Facebook Market or like OfferUp. And some of these boxes are also like resales. So how many like real number of boxes out there? It's kind of hard to estimate. And the same thing could be said for something like Destined Rivals. We have like 10,000 sold on TCG Player, right? And then there are also these boxes sold on Facebook Marketplace, OfferUp, eBay, and some are resold. The true quantity of amount that's out there is really hard to project exactly, but we do know this is something that is in the market. Now, demand is also something that's in the market, and this is also really hard to put a quantitative number on, but we can see and understand the perspective of people. Kind of people think really similarly. Like 90% of people you talk to, like, they're gonna say, oh, yeah, Destined Rivals is a nice set, or Evolving Skies is a nice set, Team Up is a nice set. And we can kind of tell by the prices, right? If we just assume that Pokemon printed an equal amount of everything, then demand would affect the prices. But that's not necessarily the case. Because demand is high, Pokemon will print and supply more so they can bring the prices back down. And this is just how market equilibriums work. And we'll go into that a little bit more. And when we talk about shortages and when we talk about shortages and surpluses, because while an item is still in print, Pokemon has the ability and the capacity to control supply accordingly to meet market demands. And although there might be a delay, they try to best meet the demands of the market to get prices that are reasonable for all consumers. However, said, when Pokemon stops printing and the supply is at a standstill, it doesn't increase. They stop printing Sword and Shield. Supply no longer increases, nor does it stay still, but it decreases as product is ripped, as product is lost or destroyed, somewhere along those lines. And so but today I want to really just focus on like some of the scenarios like new market and older market, and it's a lot, but we'll kind of get there slowly. All right, so supply and demand. There supply is in upward curves, and demand is a downward curve. Now the market equilibrium is the point where supply and demand meet. So here we go. I have a little paint thing so I can like draw and talk over this. Um, so supply and demand. Let's just use, for example, for this example right now, I want to use Destined Rivals because that's the hot set that everyone is interested in, right? So this is a market equilibrium for Destined Rivals and what's going on in the market right now. So the market price for Destined Rivals right now at this equilibrium point, it looks like it's $400, right? That's the current Facebook market price or TCG player market price, eBay market price. This is kind of generally what you see. And at this at this price, there is a certain amount of demand for X quantity and X price. So at $400, maybe there is, people are willing to buy up 1 million of these things, right? 1 million of these things. And so that's what the current price is at. It's $400 and people are willing to buy up to 1 million of these things. If Pokemon was to print more, and let's just say they printed um, an extra 1 million, so now they're printing like 2 million of these things, right? 2 million of these things. The supply curve would move, right? So at 2 million quantity, the demand for it would actually be lower, right? Because there's less in the market now. People are would only be willing to pay this price. So let's just say that's MSRP gang. There are people who think this will go to like $250 or $200, right? And I don't know the exact quantitative math for it, but for this to happen, for the supply curve to move and to get over here, Pokemon would have to print a lot. And how much do they need to print? I'm not really exactly sure of, but that's generally how the markets move. Um, and the opposite of this is like what else can affect the price, right? It can also be the demand. So today, people view this as a really good set. It's like $400. I'm willing to pay that. Perspectives can change over time because Destined Rival is still in its kind of like first year print run. We know it's still got like year two and like year 2.5 left, so it's got a while to kind of run, right? And so, in year one, this is year one, D0. In year two, sentiment changes because in year two, people will be viewing Destined Rivals the way they're viewing um, Paldean Fates 151, Paldea Evolved right now. It's gonna be out of print soon. And we know at this time, supply kind of drives up, right? Like what Pokemon does is whenever demand goes up, like demand, let's just say we saw Destined Rivals at like it was at one time the supply was over here, and that's why we saw Destined Rivals at one point. It was like $470, and that wasn't sustainable, right? That was a really high price. And then Pokemon's like, okay, this is problematic. We got to print more. So they print more, and that's how they were able to reduce the price to 400. And really, if you think about it, for Pokemon to reduce the price to like $200, they would have to go absolutely ham on the printing, like ham, if you understand how much they genuinely need to print for it to work. um, and just to say, as the set goes older, it gets older as it gets into year two, by the end of 2026 we will be in this era. Even if they print more supply, right, even if the supply is here, in year two the demand is also going to increase because people, not everyone wants it right now. But what about next year? What about December of 2026? Do you think sentiment's going to change? I think so. I think the demand is going to be right here, and we're going to be exactly right where we started it again, right? And like you can try to, I think what people are trying to do, they're trying to time the market. They don't want to buy at this like equilibrium point, and that's smart. Yeah, people want to catch it below, right? They want to catch it down here where the price is a little cheaper. They want to catch it at like 350. They want to catch it at 300, and they want to catch it at like 250. And I get it, that's fair. And but we can't really predict the market, and that's why I encourage us to DCA, just because we can't really catch that. Generally, if the prices fall, you can buy a little bit more, but we just don't know when that will happen. Now, for this kind of next model, this next example, I want to talk about market shortages because that's exactly the scenario that we're in right now. We are experiencing market shortages, and if you read this, a market shortage is when there's excess demand, and when the quantity demanded exceeds the quantity supplied at a given price, a shortage arises. This shortage drives prices upwards as consumers compete for limited supply, prompting producers to increase output. Right here, this is the key word. It prompts the producers to increase output or raise prices to meet higher demand. Isn't that what we're seeing with Pokemon right now? Pokemon has raised MSRP. Pokemon is in the works of building a new facility to meet the demand. So there's a market shortage. Okay? So this, let's just say an MSRP for a booster box, I think it was like 150 prior to the increase. I could be wrong. It could have been like 139, but something like that, right? And right now it's like on Pokemon Center websites like 161. That's MSRP. But we know like equilibrium point is not MSRP. We're gonna use Destined Rivals again as our example, just to keep things consistent. At equilibrium point, at this price, they're $400. Okay, and there's a market shortage right now. Why is there a market shortage? MSRP for Destined Rivals booster box off PokemonCenter.com is $161. Okay, and then you pay some shipping and you pay some tax. I think shipping's free, but you pay tax on it depending on your state. I live in California, sucks 10.5%, but whatever, it is what it is, right? So at $161, how many people want Destined Rivals at $161? Everyone. Everyone wants Destined Rivals at $161. I will max out my credit card. I will tell my mother to max out her credit card. I'll tell my father to max out his credit card. I'm gonna ask my stepsister to also max out her credit card. It's a joke from Rudy. But everyone's gonna max out their credit cards at $161 for Destined Rivals. Why? We know it is the set of Scarlet and Violet. And that's why we have this market shortage. Because in order to meet the needs of the market, which is right here, they would have to print this quantity. But they don't have the capacity to print that. They don't have the capacity to print that. Instead, they're printing right here, Q1. This is all they've got. And as a result, there's a market shortage. And even before they raised the prices, like it was like 150, right? It was an even crazier market shortage. At $149, like the shortage from this point and this point was far greater. So they have to increase the price to 161. But they're not going to increase the prices to like $200 per booster box. Not yet. Pokemon is trying to avoid raising the prices because it's going to look really bad for them if they increase like the MSRP of booster boxes to $200, right? And we know like, okay, Pokemon doesn't do it, but like these LGSs and these scalpers, that's what they're doing, right? These LGSs are trying to raise the prices, and so these are the free chicken tenders that everyone's talking about. Because the equilibrium point is all the way over here in the middle, anything it is that's below this, MSRP, scalpers, LGS, GameStop, all these people exist right here in the middle because there's free chicken tendies to be made. It's just free money in there. That's how supply and demand works. And Pokemon isn't gonna be the one to raise that roof. So the scalpers and the economics just create the situation for arbitrage to take place. So how does Pokemon battle this? They try to print more. They try to print to demand. And is that happening right now? They're attempting to. And so this would only apply to new sets, as I've said again. 151, Paldean Fates, and Paldea Evolve, these early blocks are safe from it. Is Destined Rivals and kind of like these Journey Together, Twilight Masquerade, Surging Sparks, will they be affected by it? I think only time can tell, because Pokemon is building a new facility. How much they're printing, no one knows. And if people are saying they know, like, come on, who really knows? You don't have the data to say. It's just like an assumption. It's really a bet that you're taking based off what you perceive and understand. But like, the reality is, if you don't have the facts and you don't have the data, you don't know. They're building a facility that is, like 2022, 2023, 2024, they print like 10 billion cards. How much increase are they going to do in 2026 or 2027? If it's just 1 billion, that's 10% increase. It's not going to do anything. 50% increase, okay, now we're talking. But even then, demand is just also increasing over time as these sets become, as more people enter the hobby and whatnot. So it's just really hard to say for sure where things are going. And really, the reality is like no one really knows. Now, I wanna talk about another scenario, because excess demand is like market shortage is not good. As an investor, when there is a market shortage, this is when you should sell. Okay, these are good opportunities to sell because there's a shortage in the market. And now let me talk about market excess markets. So market surplus. This is a little bit different of a scenario. A market surplus is when uh, the quantity supplied exceeds the quantity supply exceeds the quantity demanded at a given price. A surplus occurs. This surplus puts downward pressure on prices, encouraging producers to decrease their output or adjust prices to clear the excess supply. All right. So when have we seen this? We haven't seen this in this recent bull market, but we saw this a few years back when they overprinted a bunch of things in Sword and Shield, and Chilling Reign got a huge reprint, right? Lost Origin got a huge reprint, Fusion Strike maybe, and just like no one wanted the product. That is when the market has a surplus. And see, supply and demand, it always does this thing where it oscillates above and below, above and below. Supply will always try to meet demand. Demand will always meet supply. And it's just really this dance that's going on. And so as Pokemon prints, they're going to print and print and print until there is surplus in the market so people can get Pokemon cards again. So it's sitting on shelves again, but it takes time to do it. And to get to that point, right? So we'll use DR again. I don't think there would ever really be a surplus for DR. Never gonna happen. So this is $400, right? And for there to be a market surplus where there's more supply than demand, it's really hard to do. It's just so hard to do for something like Destined Rivals at this point. If you want to see it at MSRP, it's not gonna happen. They would have to print so much in order to have more supply than demand. I don't think that could ever happen. And just to be frank, I don't know. I don't know. They would have to print like overly as much, right? And the reason why I'm only focused on this set is because market surplus will only really exist for newer sets. If you look at Sun and Moon, if you look at Sword and Shield, early Scarlet and Violet, the supply has stopped printing. supply is going left, right. That's kind of what we're saying, and demand is also going right. So they're going in opposite directions, which just drives prices up. And the only way to create market surplus is when supply increases so much that you reach a scenario that, there are 2,000 units on the market, for example, but people are only willing to buy 1,000. Now you have products sitting on the market, and the only way to sell it is to reduce the prices or to stop printing and people just buy it up. And in these scenarios, this is when you should be buying. And I know there's a lot of fear. Pokemon has printed prismatic evolutions to the ground. If it hit MSRP, even if Destiny Rival hit MSRP, it just doesn't make sense. People would be so fearful, but that's just how a healthy market works. And we still agree it's the best set of the set. And when it is printed to the ground, mark my words, people are going to be fearful and they're going to drop it all. Or if it reduces a great amount. I don't know why there's fear, but if you understand how economics works, in due time, even if they overprinted a product, they will eventually decrease their output. They'll stop printing. They'll move on to something else. I don't think they'll adjust prices ever, but they would stop printing it. And as things get ripped, as things get opened, and demand just increases over time, right? And as surplus stops, we're just back to normal. And I hope you learned something here today from kind of these economic principles. I know a lot of people in the Pokemon investing space hasn't had the opportunity to take an economics class or really learn these things, but Pokemon is a great teacher. You can learn a lot from it. It's okay to make mistakes, I think, in this hobby or anything in life. It's really getting back up, right? We fall down 3 times, but we also need to get back up 3 times. Don't be like so don't be so prideful to where you're like, oh, I don't make mistakes in life. If you can admit that you make mistakes as a person and you're humble enough to learn from it and to not let your pride and ego tell you otherwise, I think you'll go very far in life, including this hobby of Pokemon. And so, yeah, these supply and demand curves, like, at the end of the day, still, no one really knows anything. There's no like factual data out there, not like really quantitatively. It's still kind of a guessing game, but in the long term, long scheme of things, it's very simple. Supply decreases and demand is increasing. More people get into the hobby, things get ripped, and they eventually disappear over time. And prices will increase because of that. The only way I can see prices coming down is even though supply is stagnant or it decreases, mostly decreases, is if the love for Pokemon and the hobby just goes away. People just stop caring about Pokemon one day. Like we love it right now, but what if 10, 20 years from now people just don't care about it anymore? That's the only way I see that happening. And you know, I don't know what you believe, what your sentiment is, what your values are in life, what you're trying to accomplish next year, your goals, right? Obviously, some of us got families, some of us got education, things to worry about in life other than a children's cardboard game. But, you know, there's also lots of opportunities in this hobby. And it's really fun to collect and really fun to, have these items and objects. But really, at the end of the day, what are you trying to accomplish out of this hobby? What are you trying to make out of it? Is risk something that you want to take in life right now? If so, like how much of it? And are you willing to learn from your mistakes? And I think that's all I've got today. But thank you so much for watching Pokey Accountant YouTube channel. I hope you learned a thing or two and that you have a happy holidays. Christmas is coming up in a few days. I don't know. Maybe I'll make a video before then. If not, I'll see you in the new year. Happy holidays. I'll see you guys next time. Thank you for watching.